Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Friday, January 3rd, 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. News that broke overnight while I was traveling. Iran promises retaliation after the United States kills their general, Major General Qasem Soleimani, who led the powerful Quds force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was killed in an American drone strike in Baghdad on Friday, according to the New York Times. Iran's supreme leader is vowing a forceful revenge. Americans are evacuating from Iraq and oil prices are rising. Secretary of State Pompeo says that the United States is committed to de-escalation. Okay. General Soleimani led 20 years of spying and proxy warfare, according to the New York Times, and mass protests were held in Iran as Iraq denounced a blatant violation. The attacks took place just outside of the Iraqi airport back in Baghdad. And as General Qasem Soleimani was leaving the air base, or the airport rather, he flew in from Beirut and he connected at the airport with a Shia militia leader. And it is believed that the Shia militia that he connected with was a part of the group of militia, the various militias that took over the embassy earlier this week. All of these escalations, all of these incidences are following an attack that took place in December that killed an American civilian contractor and injured military forces. Since then, America has been promising retaliation, and this was their retaliation. A drone strike from the United States forces killed not only Qasem Soleimani, but it also killed the Shia militia leader as well as others that were in the convoy leaving the military base. Again, I apologize, not the military base, but the Baghdad civilian airport, which has led to strong condemnations from Iraq. Obviously so. I was traveling yesterday as I got the news, so I could not give a take on Twitter, which is good in these kind of moments because everyone is going to shoot off with a hot take in one direction or the other. And I was in Savannah, Georgia, participating in the inauguration of the newly elected mayor there, Van Johnson Jr. or Van Johnson II. And that's when I started getting notifications of what was going on, the escalations, and then obviously the Twitter fallout. There's a lot going on. I will say that in terms of international relations, this is in terms of the global conflict and the balance of power in the region. It will be interesting to see which direction this goes. I have to agree with NBC reporter, foreign affairs reporter Richard Engel, who said that this is really a test of Iran at this point, because up until this point, Iran has done everything through proxy. They have tried to see where the line was that they could take any conflict with the United States through a proxy force like the Shia militias in Baghdad or in Iraq. And at this point, it appears as though Iran's response is likely to be either direct or clearly seen as an act committed by Iran. In other words, because of the heightened tensions, it's very possible that whatever they do in retaliation will be directly connected to them, even if it's done through a proxy, and that will lead to another escalation. Now, behind the scenes, obviously, there are concerns, the hashtag World War III, obviously the relationship between Iran and Russia. Iran represents a faction of the growing and strengthening balance of power on the global stage. And I use that loosely because we're not talking about military forces that can compete with the United States. And this is not any type of nationalistic boasting of any type. This is just a matter of numbers, the amount of money that we spend in military on our defense. You could take all of the other nations combined, I believe, and you won't get to what the United States spends on their military budget. So this is not about boasting, any type of nationalistic boasting. It's just a matter of fact. And so it's very, when I say a counterbalance of power, it's not a fair comparison, right? It's not a fair comparison. In fact, it's very likely there is a possibility that escalations, that they would de-escalate, because Iran realizes, no matter what they say, they realize the position that they're in, and their proxy, Russia, they understand that this is a conflict that's not worth going any further on. Even the Secretary of State Pompeo is saying that we want to de-escalate. Well, it would have been helpful if we hadn't escalated in the first place. But with many instances, there's an attack and a counterattack. And oftentimes, like I can give you an example. One of the best examples of how this could easily de-escalate. While everyone is giving you the path to World War III, there's plenty of takes like that. I will give you the example, one of the best examples of how this can de-escalate. I believe it was 2015, Turkey, a NATO ally, loosely speaking, more strongly so then. 2015, NATO was a strong NATO ally. And in 2015, they shut down a Russian fighter jet. Well, that's a direct conflict between Russia and Turkey being a NATO ally. Article 5 of the NATO Charter compels the United States and all other allies to mutual defense. And so there was a direct pathway between the United States and Russia having an all-out conflict because Turkey shot down a Russian fighter jet. That didn't happen. Vladimir Putin chose not to go any further. And this is, again, when I say these things, I don't want you to mistake this as any type of nationalistic boasting, right? This is not nationalistic boasting. It is a matter of rational actors, which is what we need on the international stage, especially when we have the United States not acting as a rational actor. Vladimir Putin looked at the scenario, and you know what they did, which ironically enough, they strengthened their ties to Turkey over the years that followed. They strengthened their ties with Turkey, and now Turkey is more closely aligned with Russia than it is NATO, which is a slick move, right? Low key, that is a very slick move. And so I give you that example because in situations like this, everyone thinks that it's going to be a beeline to conflict, to hot conflict, to World War III. And there's a very good possibility that that we will not see that out of necessity. Out of necessity. And this isn't to say other nations are going to be scared of the United States. I mean, nobody has time for this type of bombastic posturing. Nobody. We do not have time for it. This is not about Iran or Russia being afraid of the United States. This is not about Iran or Russia being bold and brave and taking on the great Satan of the United States. This is not about the United States being proud to be an American and we took out an enemy. No, this is about how do we avoid conflict any further? How do we not escalate into a third world war? And that's only if level heads prevail. Somewhere, level heads have to prevail. And that only happens with rational actors. And what's sad is that in the United States, currently, right now, we do not have a rational actor on the in the White House. We simply do not. We've seen that. And that is the greatest threat. The greatest threat right now, in addition to America's reach, and in addition to America's imperialistic reach, is the fact that the head of the empire is one of the most unstable actors that we've had on the international stage in quite some time. Plus, he's in the middle of an impeachment proceeding. Plus, he's coming up for re-election. He has every need and every desire to wag the dog. And plus this, in addition to that, this gives neoconservatives like John Bolton the war that he's always wanted with Iran. One way or the other, America, the neoconservative faction in America was on a beeline straight to conflict with Iran because they've already gotten rid of Iraq as a power in the region. And so in instances like this, when America is the irrational actor, it's important that other international actors let cooler heads prevail. And it's a shame that we're in a position now where there has to be an international coalition to tell America to chill the hell out. But that's more often than not, that's where we are. And don't forget the context of this, right? The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The United States pulled out of that unnecessarily. So when I say the United States, I mean the Trump administration pull out of the Iranian nuclear deal, which actually gave us a pathway to Iran coming into the international fold and being less of a pariah. And what we're seeing on the international stage right now is Russia really using soft power as a means of gaining more influence and stretching, expanding their reach, expanding their global reach. Soft power. They're not going to conflict. And listen, and this is not, when I talk about international relations, I really talk about it from the perspective that every nation state is an aggressor. Every nation state is seeking power. Every nation state has an agenda, a political agenda. And at the end of the day, if you ask me, almost every nation state is evil, with the exception of Costa Rica because they don't have a military. But even still. But Russia right now is not using hard power in a lot of scenarios. They did not use hard power with Turkey. They absolutely used hard power with Ukraine, right? So it's not a blanket statement that can be applied there, but we can see how other nations are using soft power to increase their influence. And the United States of America, being what it is, being the imperialistic force that it is, has a default baseline of brute force being used across the globe. And we saw that with Donald Trump pulling us out of the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. We saw that because that was actually a pathway forward to peacefully incorporating Iran into the international order, America's international order. But that wasn't good enough for neoconservatives. That wasn't good enough for Trump, because every so many years we have to have a war. We have to have a war because we have to spend these dollars on something. We're not going to spend it on Medicare for all. We're not going to spend it on education. We're not going to spend it on our infrastructure. We'll spend it giving it all to defense contractors, not really to military, not to the soldiers. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're facing. And without international heads prevailing, cooler heads prevailing, we'll see conflict.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Let's go. Special thank you to all of our newest patrons. Very special welcome to Tong, Tong. Thank you so much for becoming a patron. Special thank you to Glenn Sibley. Thank you, my friend, for becoming a patron. Adam, thank you for becoming a patron. And Lorena Oliver, a very special welcome to you, my friend. Thank you so much, each of you, for becoming a patron. This show is absolutely not possible without our patrons. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious family of patrons by going to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and signing up to become a supporter, a monthly supporter of the show. Again, realistically, this show does not happen without you, the patron, and we are getting closer and closer and closer to bringing back the live video show. So we'll see, as we progress to our 500 mark, to that milestone. That's how we get the live show back. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about the fodder from this strike, this drone strike at the Baghdad airport, killing Qasem Soleimani. The fallout here in the United States has been a political one and has really taken us back to 2001. There is a default position in the United States that is a bombastic nationalism, this faux patriotism that believes that the best way to be patriotic is for America to drop bombs somewhere. That's the default position. That's how we've been trained. I mean, our media is trained like that. Even reading the articles, researching the articles this morning, everyone took painstaking measures to make sure that we understood that the attack was justified, right? Every outlet did an entire section on why the attack was justified. Now, I have to give some of the media outlets credit juxtapose this to the 2017 Syrian air missile strikes, right, at the Syrian air base. Donald Trump's first act as president, really. The media really promoted that as the moment Donald Trump became president. MSNBC, the anchor that was disgraced, and he's now MSNBC and not NBC. I can't think. Brian Williams. He was talking about the beauty of our missiles shooting up in the sky. You know, I have to give the media some credit at this point, at least the media outlets that I've seen, particularly like the New York Times, NBC. They are really reporting on the side of how do we keep this thing measured, right? But underneath that conversation of how to keep this measured still is the vein of patriotism, the underbelly of patriotism, which makes people, half of our country, believe that this is a highly patriotic moment and this is a moment to be proud. That's the problem, right? When America could be doing so many other things on the international stage, what makes half of this country proud is when we're killing people, when we're dropping bombs, when we honestly, let's get to the core of it, when we're enriching defense contractors who build these missiles and these bombs. Every bomb that's dropped, every drone that's flown is created by some defense contractor that is getting filthy effing rich off of murder. And just as much as I've talked about how disgusting it is for us to have an entire industry that profits off of people dying of cancer, people struggling with leukemia, people struggling with diabetes, how we have a profit industry, a profit motive baked into our healthcare industry. Even more so disturbing is the fact that we have an industry that makes billions, if not trillions of dollars off of war. And that we would not be the imperialistic power. Actually, strike that. I want to rephrase it. We would not have to be dropping bombs on third world nations in the global south if it was not for the desire of profits by the defense industry. See, what happens very masterfully in the United States is a conflation between the U.S. military spending, you know, red, white, and blue, Star-Spangled Banner, our boys in uniforms, with the private defense industry that is manufacturing the weapons, that is sewing the uniforms. You know, I can't think of the other word for it. Whatever. It's early, or actually, it's not early. I just got home at 4 a.m. But anyway, back to my rant. We seamlessly conflate the guys that are out there fighting. Some of them are fighting for minimum wage. Some of them are fighting just because they have no other way to get out of poverty and they had no other option. So they went into the military. We conflate that with the billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that is poured into the private sector through defense contractors like Halliburton, who provide the food, the weapons manufacturers, right? Who design the bombs, the rockets, the missiles. That's not the United States government. That's not the red, white, and blue. That's Wall Street. Okay? So that's the number one mistake that we allow to fester in this country. And I say fester because just like an outbreak of herpes, every time there's an opportunity for war, it's like this outbreak of patriotism that rises to the surface like a sickness. And they seamlessly conflate conflict as some type of patriotism, as a noble thing. Like this is the most noble, the most American, the most patriotic thing that we could possibly do. When in fact, this has nothing to do with the United States of America as much as it has to do with Wall Street. And the people who are going to die in this conflict, not just we often just completely forget about the civilians on the other side of the ocean. We just completely forget about their humanity. They're not humans, not to us. But you know who else is going to die? Working class, middle class men and women who are just trying to find a way out of their economic situation. Otherwise, they would never have gone to the military in the first place. See, while my earnest hope and my focus is on us de-escalating this situation and not going any further, the remedy to this is that we absolutely have to change the grip that the military industrial complex has on this nation. If we do not, we will have perpetual war because where else are they going to get their quarterly profits margin? How else are they going to get their bonus? Unless there's somewhere to drop the bombs. It's really quite simple. It's quite simple. There are people who are sitting back, warmongers, literal warmongers. There's a lot of focus on the politicians. Yes, we can replace the politicians if we work hard enough. But what's even more difficult to replace are barons of war who have made their entire livelihood, everything about them, everything about the hundreds of people, the thousands of people who work for them has been built off of war. Defense contractors are not stupid. They make sure that there's little pieces of all of their components that are made in almost every district in this country. And so if any politician comes in talking about rolling back the defense contracts, anybody comes in talking about doing anything like that, then it has a direct effect on almost every single congressional district in this country. And so it means that there's a political price to pay for not going to war. And so we have to change the paradigm from the top to bottom. And part of that has everything to do with how we respond to these moments. And I'm not going to draw any equivalence. I don't care if you're on the left and however you respond to this in terms of your reaction to it, calling out Americans' imperialism. Do what you do, baby. Do it. Full throttle. Everybody's mad at Rose McGowan, who I honestly don't really even know who she is. I just recognize her name from Twitter every now and then, apologizing to Iran because 52% of Americans do not support this. And everybody, all of the patriotic imbeciles attacking her, telling her go back to Iran or go move to Iran. Screw them. Do that, Rose. Every person who is shouting at the top of their lungs about American imperialism and our brutish nature and our military industrial complex, shout it at the top of your lungs, because underneath this country is an underbelly of nothing but warmongers, profiteers who make all of their living, their livelihood off of how many people they can kill. And that is something that we have to root out. That is something that we have to stop in this country, and we cannot do it with the same political infrastructure that we currently have. We need a revolution. One last thing before I change the topic, I want to hit on this. I think that there's a significant difference between killing someone like Osama bin Laden, killing someone like al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, and killing a military official of a nation state, right, of a sovereign state. The difference is Baghdadi, as well as Osama bin Laden, were non-state actors, one trying to create literally a caliphate, the Islamic State, and the other just content in coordinating his attacks from various locations without being associated with any nation. The difference is they are non-state actors versus nations with military, with sovereignty, with infrastructure, with civilians, with their own constitutions, with their own way of life. And I'm not even gauging this based on the level of threat, right? Or the level of revenge that America is seeking. No, I'm gauging this based on international law, right? International law. Now, here's the problem. The international law is so murky at this point because the rules have been broken for so long, right? Because of America has made Iraq a vassal state, for lack of a better word, right? The question of America's international right, right? A legal right to commit an airstrike over a sovereign nation. Well, the real question is Iraq actually sovereign? In theory, yes. In practice, no. And so the questions of international law have been, they have been tread upon for so long. Even domestic law, even American domestic law, there's no authorization of use of military force for this. There hasn't been one, I don't know, since 2003. We're still operating under the same use of military force, authorization of use of military force, AUMF, that we had during the first Iraq War. And again, let me correct myself. This is not the first Iraq War. This is the second Iraq War, but it was that long ago. It was that long ago that we could have had 5 or 6 wars. We're in a state of perpetual war that people are making so much money off of. I know that was last segment, but can you just believe that it has been damn near 20 years in Iraq? And we're certainly going on 20 years in Afghanistan. This has been one constant giveaway to somebody, some group of somebodies that we very rarely get their names, but they have been profiting off of this conflict nonstop. But I digress. That was last segment. But anyway, the reason I make the distinction between Osama bin Laden and al-Baghdadi is not, again, it's not about the significance of their threats, because they were obviously very significant threats, but it's really about this direct conflict that we're having, that we are gearing up to have with Iran, and the question of international law and the question of international norms. And it has been so tread upon for so long that it's almost like it's a free-for-all on the international stage. And the only thing that can stop the United States of America, besides immense political pressure from within, right? It almost is a good thing that it's election time, because if there is a big enough movement, and I think that I'm confident that Americans are finally, not the overwhelming majority, but I believe that there is a majority of Americans who are finally tired of almost 2 decades of non-stop war that a political price can be paid, which is why I'm cheering on everyone who's attacking this conflict. No matter how you attack it, that's on you, however you attack it. For me, it's a question of international law and international norms, because without some type of international order, there's chaos, there's anarchy. And I mean anarchy in the academic sense, not in the political sense. And so this just represents the United States. This, to me, this is not the culmination. There are so many examples of this, but this is like just another quintessential example of how American policy and American foreign policy has weakened international norms so much so that it's a cluster F of questions of validity, in questions of sovereignty, in questions of authorization. And it's just another day. It's just another day. This is just how America behaves on the international stage, and without both domestic political pressure, but also international political pressure. It's almost to the point where America, and it's good. You know what? It's good. It's actually good that Donald Trump is the face of this. It's actually wonderful that Donald Trump is the face of this, because we're not going to have liberals jumping on board supporting it. Thankfully, we're not going to have liberals jumping on board to support, like if Joe Biden was president, then the liberals would be, singing about patriotism. So it's a good thing that Donald Trump is the face of this, because now domestically there can be pressure, immense pressure placed on it, and then internationally, right? Internationally, Donald Trump has done a masterful job of already alienating us. And so we have to leverage both the international pressure as well as domestic pressure to have this situation cease, to stop it, for us to stand down, to not escalate it further.
Hey, Ben, it's Ryan from South Carolina. Did you talk about how Ben Shapiro's followers are going to eat him, or he's being eaten by his own? So just curious if you covered that. Thanks, man. Love the show. Bye.
Ryan, Ryan from South Carolina. It's great to hear from you. So I have talked about Ben Shapiro's followers eating him a little bit. But there have been several incidents that have happened since the last time I talked about it. Most notably was when that young guy, Nick Fuentes, kind of sabotaged him with a sneak attack as he was going to some event with his wife and his kid. Nick Fuentes really just kind of accosted him verbally. And it's ironic that, well, it's fitting. It's fitting and it's to be expected. Here's what always happens, and it is inevitable. When people who know better pander to the worst elements of their base, it always comes back to bite them in the ass. And here's why. It's because when you know better, no matter how much you're willing, unless you're willing to go all the way, right? Unless you're willing to go as far as your base goes, then there will always be someone who can stand up and say, you're fake. See, I'm very clear about where I'm not going to go. Let's start there, because I think the conversation about international relations is the exact spot where I say, okay, hey, guys, I'm a leftist, but this is as far as I go with you, right? I'm clear, and it's very important to be clear. Let them have that space. Let them have the space that you're not willing to occupy. Ben Shapiro didn't want to do that. Ben Shapiro pandered to all of the worst elements. He wanted to be both the intellectual as well as the rebel rouser, for lack of a better word. But there's too many real white nationalists, white supremacists. I mean, actual, factual, proud to be bigots, like they will march in the streets with the Klan, with Nazis. There are far too many of those for Ben Shapiro to be pandering, trying to keep their sources of income, keep them as patrons. And so what always happens is when you play to that base, but you're not really going all the way with them, well, then somebody's going to rise up in the ranks and rip you a new asshole. And that's what Nick Fuentes is doing with Ben Shapiro and most of his other followers. As far as I'm concerned, as far as what I was saying with me and being a leftist, I'm very clear, right? I'm as far left as we can make these current institutions, because one thing I'm not about is tearing down the current institutions, because I don't really see a path for us to tear down the current institutions without an all-out bloody war. And, well, you could just call that the conservative in me. I got kids. I have no interest in wandering the streets of Georgia like Walking Dead, going from town to town looking for resources to feed my kids, right? I'm not interested in a post-apocalyptic America. I'm not committed to any ideology to the point where I'm willing to put the lives of my kids on the line. See, I don't want to send somebody else's kid to war, and I don't want to bring war to my kids, right? That's just kind of the way it is. Now, as far as other leftists, they're cool with that. Another place I'm not willing to go is to break the logical consistency of recognizing empires. And of course, there are levels to these things. America is by far the greatest empire. It is the empire on the international stage. But that does not mean that other nations are not imperialistic and other nations are not gathering power. And so I'm not one of those leftists that's going to say, China is the vanguard of the socialist revolution, especially when I see I'm just not going to ignore the evidence of their capitalistic oligarchic system. Right. So there's a space that I clearly and gladly see to you guys over there. Do that. Sometimes we'll be on the same page. Sometimes we're going to hate each other with the fires of 10 suns. That's cool. Right. But I'm not going to pander and try to keep all of you like Ben Shapiro does with the furthest right. I have no desire. I don't want your patron money. I don't want, because you cannot have a big tent. You cannot really have an ideological big tent when there are people that you're pandering to, people that you're just trying to keep in your tent, and you're not actually going to go the distance with them. And Ben Shapiro learned that lesson too late. Now, it's not a financial lesson. He's going to be fine financially. It's not he's not going to lose much standing. He's going to lose some, but Ben Shapiro is going to be fine. He's going to be quite fine. But what is going to happen is that you're going to see the rise of more Nick Fuentes, and you're going to see even more hyper-partisan, ideological, just far right extremism. And the difference is, here's one difference, so that people don't think I've drawn a false equivalence. There is an infrastructure on the right to take the furthest right elements and foment them to the top of the United States into the White House. You're far more, you are seeing Nazi fascism going into the White House. You're not seeing Marxist-Leninism going to the White House. So it's not apples to apples. There's a huge disadvantage that the left has, which is why I'm far more sympathetic. I mean, that's not the only reason why. Ideologically, I agree with a whole lot from the furthest left. I just have my line, and they recognize my line, and we know that we disagree on it, and we know that we could probably fight until the end of time and hate each other with the fire of 10,000 suns. But I'm not going to pander to them to try to get their support. One, because they're not going to do it anyway. So that's the difference. And I think as hosts, you know who does pander? I'm going to be quite honest with you. If I could just be petty for a second, people like Jimmy Dore, right? People who try to triangulate. People are trying to triangulate to keep as much of this independent media space as they possibly can. And what happens is that eventually somebody in their audience will look at the bullshit and say, you know what? You're scamming the real people on the left. You're scamming the real revolutionaries. You're scamming the real anti-establishment voices, and people rise up and start their own platforms. And this is what you're seeing happening on the right, with one major exception, to be redundant as I get ready to go. The exception is that they have money and resources to lift people all the way to the White House, and we're struggling just to survive. That's the difference. Have a great weekend, everybody. I will see you Monday. Take care.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.